And whoever's joined in, thank you so much for joining this AI and LA panel discussion on reimagining R&D in labs. My name is Addy, and I'm a PhD candidate at USC and president of Biotech Connection Los Angeles. And I will be moderating today's panel discussion. Really looking forward to hearing from our panelists on how they're adapting to the R&D challenges presented by COVID-19 and the modernization of R&D and how they're turning these challenges into success stories. So we'll get started in a few minutes. Let's see if maybe more people are waiting to join. Till then, why don't we just give brief introductions of who the panelists are. So if we can go in order, like Charles, Timothy, and then Jessica. You guys want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Charles Fracchia. I'm the CEO and founder of BioBright. BioBright is a company based in Boston, Massachusetts, that automates the data collection process and secures the data collection process in sort of the digital lab environment that is today's environment. We were born sort of about 5 years ago out of sort of MIT and Harvard, doing this work at the intersection of data, security, and biological workflows. And recently we were actually acquired by Dotmatics, a leading company sort of in the informatics field in the biology space. That's me.
Awesome. One of the good things about virtual is we have people joining from all over. Timothy, if you want to go next.
Hi, Tim Gardner. I'm the founder and CEO of Riffyn. Riffyn is a software as a service provider based in Oakland with offices around the world. We're about 6 years old. Our product is software for R&D process design and data analytics, specifically creating blueprints of your scientific processes and then collecting data against that to assess how those are performing and identify the outcomes of your experiments with machine learning and other statistical tools.
Awesome, thank you. And Jessica, if you want to share.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Grondin. So I'm the lab manager at BioLabs, actually in LA. We have 12 locations nationwide. We have a new one actually opening next year in Dallas. And then we'll be moving international, and we have some in Paris that are going to open, which is really exciting. So we're an incubator space, which essentially means we provide biotech startups, and we keep it pretty broad. It's all life science. And what we do is they rent out bench spaces. It can be one bench at a time in office space. And then we provide them with equipment and just the resources to really help them grow and develop. So our motto at BioLabs is pretty much that we leave you with the science and we take care of everything else.
Awesome. So we really have a diverse panelists here. So I guess we can start off with talking how R&D was already changing and reimagining. We were already thinking of how to reimagine R&D in the traditional sense. And then COVID hit, and then we had to really fast track all the innovation. So if you want to talk about how already there was a change happening, and then suddenly we had to fast track and really quickly adapt to those changes. So Charles, in your experience, what was reimagining which was already going on and then you had to suddenly pivot?
Yes. So for all the people who just joined us, my company focuses on securely collecting digital data. So, for us, remote operation is sort of very common. What we did see with a range of our customers, especially in the large pharma space, some companies and facilities that were absolutely essential to the response and continue to be essential to the response internationally, be it vaccine manufacturing or testing or candidate search, et cetera. What we saw is that COVID really hit hit hard and was difficult, especially for remote work policies. I mean, when you're trying to scale up a process at a sort of a 4,000 liter reactor case, and your facility is responsible for making several million doses of even just influenza vaccine. It's a big deal. If you can't get into the office, if you can't get into the facility, that's really, really hard. So what we saw was that when COVID hit, there was an accelerated, I think we saw this in all industries, but especially in the manufacturing space, we saw an acceleration towards digital tools. And that really yanked companies that perhaps weren't necessarily ready for a digital transformation or were just starting to be there. We're talking about companies that are hundreds of years old that are slowly moving towards digitalization, but had a hard time. And so, frankly, it was difficult for many of our customers. We were able to enable a lot of this transformation rapidly in a secure manner. We can talk to the cybersecurity of our solution, et cetera, which is very forward. But it's not just us. It's the instrument vendors. It's everything else being used and everything going through a VPN, et cetera. There were some real challenges. I think, however, that it's been an opportunity for these companies to really see or be smacked in the face with how important this transition is. Not just from a material standpoint of using data science to discover new drugs, new candidates, and bring things to market faster, but also just to do business as usual. So I think that's an opportunity. I think it's difficult now in mid-October for any pharmaceutical company, especially sort of in the middle of this COVID crisis, to say, we're going to slow down our digital transformation. We're not going to use digital transformation in these parts of this lab or in this R&D process because it's too difficult or whatever. No, that's no longer a conversation. Whereas a year ago, frankly, in some places it was. So I think those are really the big things that we saw hands-on with the COVID crisis.
Awesome. Tim, if you want to share your experience, and your video is off. If I don't know if that's...
You're back. I can see you, Tim. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay.
So maybe it's just my...
Thanks, Adi. Yeah. So COVID was a very visceral experience for us. The arrival of COVID officially was the Diamond Princess cruise ship, which parked about a mile away from our office in Oakland. So we watched the ship basically sail in, and as it did, all the people in our office got increasingly nervous. So no one quite knew what to do. And if you recall, at that time, it was like, just wash your hands and keep the room clean. And it was just kind of funny in retrospect in a bad way. But so what happened is people started to get increasingly nervous. And then ironically, on March 12th, we signed a lease agreement expansion to add 50% more space to our office. And then on March 13th, we sent everybody home. We said, go get your chairs, get your monitors, take everything with you because we're probably not coming back here for a long time. And so we had a stream of cars driving up to the building, packing up their stuff, and we haven't been back since. But the truth is we're kind of lucky because as a software company, it honestly, it almost doesn't matter. It's psychologically difficult for some who really enjoy the in-person interaction, but from a perspective of getting our work done, it was not a problem. So what we did is we made some immediate shifts and we started doing virtual trainings. We always had done that, but it was sort of hybrid. And now we went to full virtual. We developed a full online course for learning our software product and put that on our help docs. And what we saw was a lot of our customers, they shut down too, at least partially. And so those folks had a lot of time to do that kind of training, which was in some sense a boon because it gave them a chance to catch up and really, transition from an old way of doing things to a new way because they had the time to learn the new approach, which is a really good thing. But on the negative side, we also saw a lot of projects get paused, delayed, hung up because you just, they're either you couldn't go to the lab, or if you did go to the lab, you were working on COVID-related stuff, and it was brute force. We're not going to go implement new digital technologies right now. It's like, I don't care if it's 10 times more inefficient than it should be. Just get it done and brute force it. And so we went through that period, and then towards the end of the summer, it started to change. People, to Charles's point, were like, we got to do things differently. They had time to sort of think it through. And in the fall, people were coming out of that self-analysis and looking for new solutions. And the fall has been incredibly busy. We were, success stories for us. We have one pharma customer that's using our software for vaccines development for COVID, and Imperial College helped put a COVID testing assay into service in 9 weeks at the National Health Services in the UK, using the Riffyn platform to develop those assays. And we're carrying that work further now. So, there was a bit of a pause or a reset, and then people started to come out, I think, with a new focus on digital as an enabling technology.
Yeah, definitely. And I can tell that my wet lab was also closed, and we were very non-digital before. So we were also forced to actually learn a few things. Jessica, what about you? You run an incubator space with a variety of labs in there. So how were you adapting?
So ours is very different. Obviously with wet lab, as I'm sure you've experienced, you can't really shut down people's science, especially people paying you money to do their science. So one of the hard parts was when COVID first happened, as Tim mentioned, no one really knew what to do, and there wasn't really a clear cut, like, here's the protocol. So we kind of had to adapt. And unfortunately, so we're nationwide, but each site had to adapt differently because state regulations, county regulations were all so completely different. And I felt so bad for our New York site because they just got the worst of it, and they had to modify everything. And AI played a big role for them. They brought in new software, as did we. We have QR codes on our doors for everyone to sign in, so we know who's coming in and out of the space. But we had to do a lot of spacing within our wet lab because we do have these companies who still need to come in and do their research because they have live cells in the incubators, and they just got grants, and the grants kind of depend on their progress. So we got acrylic sheets from a company that happened to mass produce them nearby. I kept picking them up, throwing them in my truck. Thank goodness I had a truck, and just setting up these acrylic sheets in between each 6-foot bench, which at first looked really tacky and really unprofessional, but now they look a lot better and they're see-through, so it looks a little bit better. But we definitely had to shift and adjust. We made some changes where we told members, if you're an office personnel only, you're not working within the lab, stay home for the safety of everyone, and then just work remotely. There's a lot of capabilities. There's a lot of software. There's, we have email, we have phones. You can do this at home. There's really no need to come in. And we've expanded our conference rooms as well with cameras, integrated cameras within the conference rooms to do Zoom calls and all of that. We expanded our scheduling system so people could schedule not only just our conference rooms, which we had before, but our equipment. And that helps too, because then we don't have this issue of people are using equipment back to back. There's a little bit of a buffer. People can plan out their experiments, so they're not overlapping, which can cause a little bit of issues in general when you're planning out experiments. But it also limits that footprint of you could potentially be passing COVID if you're touching things a lot. And, we really we have a lot of security measures we had to update, but we definitely implemented a lot of software to really help enable getting through and keeping our lab open, which was really beneficial because we had the company actually nearby at UCLA who was working in their incubator. When UCLA shut down, that incubator did. So we had a company who came to us and said, we don't need to stay here long term. We just need a space till they open back up. So they came and stayed in our space. We made room for them for 2 months until they could go back to their original lab. So it was definitely a shift, but we were able to make it work, which was nice that we were capable of doing that.
Awesome. Yeah. And certainly a different type of challenges when you cannot do work from home in wet labs. So you have to find innovative way for scheduling. Let me ask you, what are certain examples of things or tools which you are using now, which we were not using before, or there was a high reluctance to use before, and maybe you guys were actually asking people to use them, but they were like very slow. So I know that you mentioned some data science tools, but if you want to expand on like maybe a little more information on like what is being used right now, which people were just like before March, they were like we're not interested. So I know people were not interested in scheduling because they just used to show up to the equipment and use it. I was like that, and so now I plan and I put it on the calendar and do things like that. So is there any other tools which you think people are now using, which were not being used in the labs before? Charles or Tim, do you want to?
I'll let Jessica go first. I think she probably has the most obvious expertise here.
Yeah, Adi, as you mentioned, it's definitely the scheduling. I feel like scientists are like a creature of habit. Like, we want to do it the way we've always done it. We don't want to change. We have our protocols. We have our SOPs. So telling everyone, sorry, you have to book and schedule when you want to use it, and them going, oh, I have to think my whole day through, was kind of rough. And I felt like I had ruined their day and like just soul crushed their day. But they're reluctant now. Like, at first they hated the idea. They did not want to use it. And I know they didn't. I put QR codes at each piece of equipment. So all they had to do was scan with their phone and see if someone was using it for the day and then book a time. And it wasn't being utilized. And then they slowly started adapting it. And now they're actually excited about it because there's one machine in particular that they're all using. And they're like, oh, this is actually really beneficial because now I don't have to worry about someone using it when I need to use it for like 3 hours. So that's a big part of at least our space that we integrated, that people are a little hesitant on, but was very beneficial.
Awesome. And in terms of like data science tools or analytics tools or AI tools, were there some cases where people were just not using them before, but now they are because the situation demands it? Were there any cases used?
Yeah, I mean, in our case, I mean, a lot of our customers use these tools and are sort of at the cutting edge of trying to apply AI to biological research problems. So all the usual tool suites like Jupyter notebooks, obviously to use TensorFlow, Keras, and things like that, were in effect before. I think what did change in a sense is the volume of data going through these systems. Obviously, we saw a hit when people were not in the lab, but gradually, especially in the Boston area, protocols and testing. Many of our customers, get tested twice a week at their local facilities and get their results, quite quickly. And so the volume sort of took a dip, and then the data volume went up. And actually, what we saw is the data volume exceeding the step before COVID. To be honest with you, I think this was just a general trend, but it sort of got accelerated because I think people got used to a different way of working. So, the usual tools like video conferencing and things like that obviously were in much higher demand. What we did see is a range of tools around cybersecurity were actually a lot more. We do a lot of work with the government and other sort of more sensitive workflows and facilities, and that was extremely important. Being able to have their workers get access to information that was otherwise, sensitive or assumed to just be on site, that actually created a need and a desire for more secure solutions. And so there's tools around that, sort of encryption, decryption systems, data integrity and security tools, both for their email suites, but now also translating all the way down to their data. We saw all of that. I'd say that's what we primarily saw in our side.
Awesome.
And for us, it was there's probably 3 drivers towards of the shift. The first I already mentioned is just finally having actual time to train technology, because usually people are asked to keep the ship running while also rebuilding it with the next technology, and they don't have time. We had one person who'd been using our software for over a year then go through this training and tell us, I think it's the first time I understood what I was doing, because she never had a chance hours and really learn it. And so that led to a burst of increased use. The second driver, I think, is new patterns that have to be dealt with in the handling of materials. The specific example is pooled COVID assays. That requires very careful sample tracking, because you're pooling them and then you need to deconvolve that. And that drove an intense need in certain case for the complex sample path handling that Riffyn provides. And so that drove the willingness to move off of spreadsheets. Whereas before you're like, whatever, I'll just dump it in a spreadsheet. And it's like, you can't do that anymore because it's a disaster waiting to happen. So that created incentive. And the third factor, I think, for adoption is the hyper distribution now of work. So it used to be you'd collaborate across the country, across the globe, 2 sites, and that created need. But now, literally, you have to work virtually with your neighbor 2 miles away. And so being able to share a document or an experiment design and edit it in real time with your collaborator is an incredible enabler, and we could provide that. So those 3 factors drove the reason to start to make the shift. It wasn't an abstract notion of, we got to be digital now. It was just those practical needs.
Definitely. So I know we were all told that this is just a 2-week thing, and now we're 7 months into it. And we have improved definitely from what we started, but certainly it's not a perfect system set up there. So we have innovators in the audience. What are currently lacking, or where innovation still needs to be done? What needs to be still improved? So if we all just want to take a hit at this question. So Charles, why don't we start with you? Do you have any places where you still want innovation to still happen, film systems still to improve?
Yeah, I guess I'll start on a positive or hopeful note, right? Attending many of these virtual conferences and meetings in the last few weeks and months, it's clear that we're making leaps and bounds in terms of communicating, even just this platform and this conference is an example of it, but communicating and sharing ideas in a way that is actually quite natural. I think that has made a huge leap. It feels like there still needs to be a little bit of forward momentum there, but that's been one piece that I'm happy to see. I think, frankly, the second piece for scientific discovery is we need to move away from very heavy monolithical software tools that live only on one specific version of Windows, doesn't port. If it breaks, Lord forbid, Jessica's instrument software breaks on a Thursday, and then how do you replace that today in the middle of COVID? It's a nightmare, right? We've had customers tell us that and actually install us for many reasons to actually palliate the potential downtime that would come because the instrument software itself is old, aging, doesn't support the latest update of Windows, and by mistake the machine updates or whatever happens, and now all of a sudden you're now left with a $1.5 million piece of instrument that doesn't run anymore. And these are real nightmare scenarios. So I think that one aspect that I think really needs to make a leap and leapfrog into the future is this layer, is trying to help virtualize and make much more reproducible the operation of instrumentation in the laboratory. I think this is probably the piece that, in my mind, is the most dangerous to our workflow today.
Definitely. I can tell from my experience, half of the computers in my lab are offline because we don't want them to update, because then they'll stop working. so I couldn't access them because they are offline. So yes, if anyone out there is, please innovate in that. So
it's the ultimate in security. Just don't let anybody log in.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we have to adapt. So Timothy, in your experience, where are the gaps still remaining, and where innovation should happen?
Well, I think the most exciting, hopeful thing, I like your word, Charles, about COVID in terms of health and medicine, is the proof that you can deliver drugs to market a hell of a lot faster than we have. So we have become accustomed to the conventional wisdom. It's 10 to 15 years to develop a new drug. We started Riffyn under the belief that that was nonsense, that what's slowing us down is human collaboration and data deficiencies. We just don't work well together. The actual time constant of what you could do to deliver something to market could be twice as fast, 3 times as fast, 4 times as fast as what we saw normally. And then here we have COVID under extreme duress. The world has shown that you could take a drug, a vaccine, in 1 to 2 years from start to finish. We're not there yet, but when we do get there, it'll probably be 18 months, not 10 years. And it's record setting, but it proves that it's not the biology that's limiting us, it's ourselves. And that sets the pace. We just need to figure out the technologies to get there and make that routine, and we can. And that's what I really hope is the ultimate transformation out of this, is that drugs get developed in 18 months, not 10 years.
That's a really good point. So I'll take Jessica's answer on this previous question and circle back on that. So Jessica, the same question, where do we innovate, and what gaps do we fill, or what are we hopeful for?
Yeah, so actually both on piggyback on both of their answers, I think it's twofold for the wet lab. It's exactly that, the communication and kind of like the technology is really help enabling speed up the process, because as an example, we have a company in our space. They just moved in a year ago. They just started their company and they already have 7 patents. And it's not because, anything had an impediment before. It's because now they're able to do, Zoom calls. They're able to develop connections. They're able to communicate with people across the country, and also partnerships, which kind of ties into this other company we have. COVID happens and they were actually supposed to do this really crazy partnership with a group in Japan. And obviously with COVID, and they said, no, you can't fly out there. Well, it didn't impede them because there's this technology for them to communicate and to work with them still. So they ended up partnering with them, and they're actually developing a technology that also speeds up the process for drug development. And one of their big things that they say about their company is using AI for drug discovery. And I think that it's on both sides, like developing the software to help enable the tech. So for instances, we have machines that are constantly developing. In a wet lab, I have to read articles all the time to keep up with the technology that's constantly developing. And each year something new will come out, and I'm like, I have no idea what that does, but let's figure it out. And it's something that could speed up our process, threefold. And it's constantly happening for the labs everywhere. And, a part of that too, that's really enabling, as Timothy had said, speeding up this process for like drug development is also now the capability for collaboration and the tools that we have for people to collaborate and to work together. Before you did clinical trials, it was a process to, find not only volunteers, but get it set up, get the collaboration, get the hospitals to partner. Now it's just because there's the network, there's the development of this network of people. It's so much faster. It's so easy, so much easier to develop, which is actually funny because I just did a talk yesterday with a group of doctors who were talking about community-based clinical trials and how before it used to be a process. It used to even be more expensive to really expand your clinical trials to get more involvement and get more participants. And now because there's easier ways there's sites that can recruit participants and volunteers for the clinical trials. That's speeding up the process in itself. So yeah, I think it's constant. There's constant improvement, and I think like we're going in the right direction. I think AI in general and really the technology available is what's really improving the process and speeding up the timeline.
Definitely. So from everyone, I think what we definitely hear is we're definitely moving in the right direction. We have a lot to be optimistic about, and we have shown immense innovation and creativity in a time of, the biggest crisis in modern history. This question, and I'm very curious from what Timothy was also saying. A lot of change has happened, and so in terms of what changes have happened, what is here to stay and what is just temporary? Because for me, working just 50% of the capacity, I hope that's not a permanent shift. I hope once we can move towards 100% capacity in the labs, and red tape was cut and we speed up the process. A lot of digitalization has happened, so a lot of changes have happened. Do you think all these changes are permanent, or do you think once we have the vaccine and the COVID starts to die off, we'll go back to what we called as go back to normal, or is it just a new normal now? So Timothy, what is your take? Are all these changes you are implementing and seeing, are they permanent, or would you like for them to be permanent, or are these things we would like to go back to the old times once COVID is over?
It's a good question. I think the draw of physical social interaction is so powerful for humans. We're going to revert in a very large way to the way we always did things. But I also think there's going to be lasting changes. For example, for us, during COVID, we have reshaped our staff in some way. People moved around. We hired people without reference to geography, just best fit, because it didn't matter. We didn't even think about it. And we've learned to work really effectively virtually. And I think we'll make that permanent. But some people really want to be in the office. So I think we're going to move to a kind of permanent hybrid model. And I have a suspicion that it's going to be that way globally, because a lot of people, it works better for them to work from home and they'd prefer it. For others, they'd rather be in the office. And companies now realize it's nothing to be afraid of, and they'll embrace that.
Yeah, and I think the idea of having your employees in the office to have them productive is gonna dilute down, because they are productive from home also. Charles, same question for you. Do you think the changes you're implementing are permanent, or?
Yeah, I think in a large capacity we pulled the plug on sort of being in person pretty early on. I think most of that is going to stay. What we've learned, frankly, is that what Tim was saying is that we can be extremely productive, in many cases actually more productive, by providing sort of that breathing room for people. At the same time, I hear from my staff all the time, like, would be great sort of to get together. And in fact, we are actually making moves to start doing that in a controlled fashion. Luckily in Massachusetts, we have fairly ubiquitous testing that's available. And so we're starting to understand. Our chief medical officer is actually putting those policies in place to understand how can we do that safely and provide those interactions and the human connection, the relationship building. I mean, we hired 4 or 5 people during COVID. Again, same thing as Tim, like with no regard to geography. And so just fit, and that's been wonderful from a fit perspective. But people are, we've hired people that we've never met in person, and so there's a few occasions where we are arranging, and we have arranged to do that, and that's really important for a team. That's really important, especially a team like ours, where the feeling of the team is so important to all the members. I think that all of that is here to stay. We're going to change the way we do events internally a little bit to accommodate for those things, to take into account ubiquitous testing and users testing. And then some of the changes around the office, frankly, I don't know. I just don't know yet. We were actually set to sign a new lease. We're rethinking about the way we're using the office. We are a very digital company anyway, at our core, but we still want a presence. And so we're playing around. We're actually doing some experiments in the next few months to figure out what is the best mode. And at the same time, we're constantly assessing, okay, well, how long is that going to be true for? I think at some point, I don't know if COVID's going to go away completely ever, but at some point we're going to have a vaccine. We're going to have ubiquitous testing, et cetera. So that is starting to change. I think our attitude has changed, and I think it's not going to revert in that respect. But the office, I still don't know. We're still thinking about exactly what the best setup is.
Definitely. And Jessica, you have a shared lab, model. Lots of changes in the physical space. Which changes do you think are permanent, and which people are just dying to go back to the normal before?
Yeah, I think as was kind of touched on, that people are trying to revert a little bit back because they like that human interaction. I see people kind of letting their guard down a little bit. But I think that there is going to be some lasting changes because of this. I think in some ways it's going to go back and people are going to want to be back in the space, but I think it's going to leave it kind of up to companies. I think some companies who have had to switch to this more like teleworking situation are now becoming more open to it, that were hesitant at first and realizing this does work, and that some people are actually, we've seen, are more productive because of it. They're able to get work done in like their own mental space. Some people at home work better. So I've actually seen some of the companies in our space almost get more done in this period of time than they did before, because they're really able to focus also then on the business side. To really wind down and just put their main focus at that to develop their company. But some of the changes, especially in a wet lab, or spacing is becoming something that I think might be permanent. Now we're more aware, we just can't have people this close of quarters, and the scheduling of equipment is going to stay the same, because one, it helps that people aren't using the same equipment constantly and touching everything, but it also just helps with streamlining the process. People aren't trying to fight over equipment and overlap. They can plan out their experiments better, which I think helps them in the long run as well. And it's funny because Gary, our site director, and I had been talking about this recently about our acrylic sheets we put up as dividers. We keep one bench space in between to maintain 6 feet. Even though they are 6-foot benches, there's an empty one in between every one. And we were talking about if we'll ever even go back to filling that, because it makes you more aware, maybe it is a little too close. But yeah, I think there will be some lasting changes, but in some ways, I think it will go slightly back just from a human interaction standpoint. I do miss in-person events, but it's kind of nice having them virtual because I'm able to attend more, and some of them are not anywhere near me. For example, this one, and I have another one later today, would be on opposite ends of the country. So it's kind of nice to be able to participate in more events like that.
Definitely, and even within LA, it's impossible to attend 2 or 3 events in a day. So now we're able to. So I guess, what we really draw from all this discussion is the automation, the digitalization is definitely here to stay. And it's glad that we've been pushing for a digitalized R&D, and now COVID has forced us. But we're definitely optimistic about more of a hybrid human interaction soon, in a few months, or I know it probably won't be in weeks, but in a few months, we would be, allowed to have in-person meetings and some conferences or so on. And I guess, for people who like being home, they would be allowed to stay home, and people who want to go to office, they'll be allowed to go to office. So lots to be optimistic about. So we're just a few minutes shy of our allotted time. If anyone has like any thing to close up with, it would be great. If anyone in the audience wants to ask questions to our amazing panelists, that would be a great chance as well. But I had really fun time, discussing things with you guys today, and getting to know how things are going with each and every organization. And yeah, really great chatting today.
Yeah, it's nice to see too, like in different areas of the country, how it's working out. Kind of saying like, oh, we're all in the same boat. We're all going through this the same way.
Adi, thank you for the great questions.
Yeah, thanks for organizing this.
Yeah, awesome. I was just saying, one of the good things is that we're not alone. The whole world is going through the same thing. So at least, it's not just why me, it's the whole world.
Yeah.
So
I think the other thing is that it also puts it in clear view how important biotech is to international health security. And I think for anybody who still was reluctant or didn't know how important biotechnology is going to be for humanity's future, I mean, I think it's pretty darn clear now. So solving all these problems is essential for the next 100 years.
Definitely. And I remember 15 years ago when I took biotech, everyone was like, the age of biotech will come. I think now the age of biotech has come. So I'm glad that finally the focus is on biotech.
Yeah, I mean, I was even thinking about like the technology and how it's advanced science, and the fact like Western blots, like from when I was in grad school, and the just excruciating pain of planning your entire day around Western blots, and now there's machines that do it for you. And I'm like, I wasted a whole day on one, and now people can just pop them out like no problem.
Yeah, and it's the same with the digital data side, right, of things. Is like, oh my goodness, if only I had this, I would. I used to spend, hundreds of hours doing this, and now it's automated. So.
Yeah, and it's great, and I think that's what is advancing everything. But it's just funny to think, like, even in a year, how fast everything changes.
Yep.
Well, I got to jump to another meeting.
Awesome.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you all.
Enjoy the time.
Yeah, and thank you to ANLA for organizing this.
Thank you
so much.
Nice to meet you all.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.